Welcome to Mrs. Bays' 6th grade math video lesson. This is the third video in the series on order of operations. Let's begin by reviewing some notes. I like to do order of operations considering 4 steps and not using PEMDAS starting in 6th grade. As we enter 6th grade and move up 7th and 8th grade, we need to look at more things than just parentheses and exponents as you learned in 5th grade. So to do that, I like looking at these as steps. So step 1 would be grouping symbols. And we use parentheses and brackets. Step 2, we're looking for exponents. For example, the 2x squared or the 3 cubed. We're also looking for roots. Now, chances are you're not going to find roots in 6th grade, but you will need it in the upper grades. The most common root is the square root. Step 3, we look for multiplication or division. The symbols we use for multiplication would be the X, although we need to get away from that symbol because we need it to become a letter as we work toward algebra. We also will look at the big dot, and we can also use the parentheses for multiplication symbols. Also remember, with multiplication division, we always work from left to right. In the last step, step 4, we do addition or subtraction. We use the plus sign for addition and the minus sign for subtraction. And again, we work from left to right. Now, please remember that with expressions, we do not have equal signs. So you should not be using equal signs in this work. And you'll see that I do not use equal signs. So please do not include those. But the work has a particular shape, and that is a V shape. Now, that V doesn't have to be a perfect V, but it should be fairly close. All right, as we work these problems, I would like for you to think of it as a guided practice. So it would be great if you could use your own paper and write these out and practice as I go over them. I highly recommend that you use a highlighter or a colored pencil and the calculator, the TI-30X2S, because that is the state-approved calculator. All right, let's begin. In this lesson, we're going to look at how brackets are used as grouping symbols. So in this case, we have parentheses and brackets. So we're in step 1, grouping symbols. Now, we call this working in the innermost set of grouping symbols, and that would be the parentheses. So I'm going to use my fingers and just cover everything up so we can just look at the parentheses. We have addition and an exponent. Well, that means we need to do the exponent first because the exponent is in step 2 and addition is in step 4. And we definitely need to use these steps in order. So that means I'm going to highlight 2 squared. And 2 squared is 4. And if you have a problem remembering how to do these, you can always put them in your calculator. And we will review the calculator as we go. I now need to bring everything else down around this 4. So that would be the parenthesis plus 5, parenthesis, the bracket, minus 3 right bracket times 2. But notice we still have grouping symbols. So again, I'm going to use my fingers. I'm going to cover up what we don't need to hopefully make it less confusing for you. See that we have parentheses and we have addition only. So that's what we're going to do next. 5 plus 4 is 9, and 9 is a positive number, so we do not need to bring down the parentheses, but we are going to bring everything else down, which would be minus 3, right bracket, left bracket, times 2. Well, notice we still have grouping symbols, but only subtraction inside, so I will highlight that as our next piece of work. 9 minus 3 is 6. 6 is positive, so I do not need to bring the grouping symbol down, the brackets down, so I'm going to leave it just as a 6 and bring down the times big dot 2. Since that's all we have left to do, I'm going to highlight that. And 6 times 2 is 12. And here's that V shape that I was referring to. And let's number the lines of work. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have 5 lines of work for this problem. Okay, moving on. Number 2, we have grouping symbols. That's where we're going to begin. So I'm gonna cover everything else up. We have subtraction and we have an exponent. So according to our steps, we're gonna do the exponent first. So I'm gonna highlight that. And I'm gonna put this one in the calculator to show you how to put in a negative number. So notice the number is negative, and from prior lessons, we've learned that negative numbers need protected with parentheses. So I'm gonna start with the left parenthesis in the calculator. Negative is this button near the bottom of the keyboard. Notice it has parentheses around it to help you remember that you need parentheses around a negative number. So negative 2, right parenthesis, caret 2, enter. And that's a positive 4. Now let's bring everything else down. So that's minus the 4. We're going to bring down the brackets, plus 3 divided, and then the 3 squared. So I just brought everything down. But notice I still have the symbols, the grouping symbols. So I'm going to highlight what's inside. 4 minus 4, and that is 0. I do not need to keep the brackets around the 0, so I'm going to bring everything else down. Now I have an exponent, division, and addition. The exponent will come next because that's step 2. 3 squared is 9. Now let's bring everything else down. I have 2 things left to do, and that's divide or add. Division is step 3, addition is step 4, so we're going to divide first. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Bring everything else down. All I have left to do is add. 3 plus 0 is 3. And I'm going to number my lines of work. And see, this one has 6 lines of work. Okay, let's look at some more practice. And again, I'd like for you to consider this to be guided practice, so you are working these problems along with me. Let's begin with number 1, and I'm looking for grouping symbols. And you might think that we have grouping symbols here, but we don't, because this set of parentheses is protecting that negative 2. So next thing we look for, step 2, is exponents. So I'm going to highlight the exponent. That's 2 cubed. So in our calculator, we will type 2 caret 3, enter, and get 8. So after I write down the 8, I bring everything else down. So notice I have step 1, I don't have any grouping symbols. Step 2, I don't have any exponents or roots. Step 3 is multiplication or division, and I have multiplication. So let's highlight that. 8 times 10 is 80, and let's bring everything else down. Now I have subtraction and addition. Both are in step 4, but we have to work left to right. So I'm going to highlight 80 minus 3, which is 77, and bring everything else down. Now in a prior lesson, we learned how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide with signed numbers or integers. So 77 plus a negative 2. First, let's highlight it because that's the work we are working on now. And the answer is 75. And I'm going to number my lines of work. Number 2. I have brackets. So I'm going to do the brackets first because that's my grouping symbol. So I'm going to cover up this times 2 for just a moment to kind of eliminate some of the work that we don't have to worry about quite yet. We have an exponent, subtraction, and addition. So according to our steps of order of operations, we're going to do the exponent first. So let's highlight that. That's 5 squared. So 5 caret 2 is 25 if you need to use your calculator. Let's bring everything else down, including the bracket and the times 2 afterwards. Now notice we still have brackets or grouping symbols. We have subtraction and addition inside, and so both are in step 4, but we have to work left to right, so that means we're going to do the 25 minus 6 first. And 25 minus 6 is 19. And now let's bring everything else down. I still have grouping symbols. I still have those brackets, so I'm going to highlight that. This is 19 plus a negative 5, so we're adding an integer. 19 plus a negative 5 is 14. 14 is a positive number. I do not need parentheses or brackets to protect it, so all I'm going to do now is bring down the times 2. So I highlight that because that's all I have left to do. 14 times 2 is 28. So I'm going to number my lines of work, and I'll explain why later. Let's move on to number 3. Looking at number 3, it looks like we have grouping symbols, but let's take a closer look. The parentheses are protecting these negative numbers, so those aren't considered grouping symbols in this case. So step 2, we're looking for exponents, and yes, I have an exponent. So let's highlight that exponent. Now let's put that one in the calculator so we know how. So because it is a negative number, we need to protect it with parentheses. The negative button is at the bottom of the keyboard of the calculator. So I press that. 3, right parenthesis, caret 3. Now press enter, and you get negative 27. Now, wait a minute, this is a negative number. So remember, negative numbers need to be protected. So we're going to put parentheses around that negative 27. Now let's bring everything else down. So let's go back over the steps. Step 1 is grouping symbols. No, I don't have that. Step 2 is exponents. No, I don't have any exponents. Step 3 is multiplying or dividing, and yes, we do have multiplication. So I'm going to highlight that. 9 times negative 10 is negative 90, but that's a negative number, so we need to protect it with parentheses. Let's bring everything else down and go over the steps again. Step 1, grouping symbols. No. Step 2, exponents and roots. No. Step 3, multiplication and division. No. Step 4, addition and subtraction. Yes, we have both, but we have to work left to right. That means we're going to do negative 90 minus a negative 27 first. Now let's review how to add or subtract a negative number. So let's review by saying that this is the opposite of a negative 27. So what's the opposite of a negative? A positive. So I'm going to use a different color pen, and I'm going to highlight or actually change these minus signs and negative sign to both plus signs. So now I have negative 90 plus 27. Well, that's a negative 63, but it's a negative number, so I need to protect it with parentheses and bring everything else down. I only have addition left, so I'm going to highlight. Negative 63 plus 10 is a negative 53. Now, I know that negative 53 is a negative number, but since it is our answer, we do not have to put parentheses around the negative 53, although we can if we want to. Let's number the lines of work and move on to number 4. Number 4, we have brackets again. So I'm going to use my finger just to cover up what we don't need to look at right away. We have subtraction, addition, and an exponent. So the exponent comes before addition and subtraction. So let's highlight that. That's 2 cubed. So that's 2 caret 3, which is 8. And now let's bring everything else down. That's the bracket plus times and -5. So I'm just bringing everything else down. I still have grouping symbols, which is the bracket, but inside I have subtraction and addition. Both are step 4. So that means we're going to do what comes first from left to right, and that is subtract. So 7 minus 4 is 3. And now let's bring everything else down, including the brackets. So look, I still have brackets. That's 3 plus 8 inside the brackets. Let's highlight that. 3 plus 8 is 11. 11 is positive, so I do not need to bring the brackets down. So I'm going to bring down the times symbol and the -5, which does need to be protected. And 5 times -11, I'm going to highlight, that's -55. I do not need to put parentheses around the -55 because that is my final answer. And I'm going to number these lines of work. And see, I have 5 lines of work. You need to have all 5, just like I'm showing you. Let's look at number 5. Number 5, we're looking for grouping symbols, and I don't see grouping symbols because these parentheses are protecting that -3. But I do see an exponent. That's step 2. So let's highlight that. And let's put that in our calculator. So I'm going to clear. And I'm going to, because it's a negative, I'm going to put in left parenthesis, -3, right parenthesis, caret 3, enter. And notice it's a negative number. It's -27. So I need to protect that negative with a set of parentheses. Now let's bring everything else down. Step 1, grouping symbols? No. Step 2, exponents or roots? No. Step 3, multiplication or division? Yes. So let's highlight that. That's 6 times 2, which is 12. And now let's bring everything else down. All right, let's go through the steps again. Step 1, grouping symbols? No. Step 2, exponents or roots? No. Step 3, multiplication or division? No. Step 4, addition and subtraction? Yes, I have addition and subtraction. But in step 4, we work left to right. So I'm going to highlight 10 plus 12, which is 22. Now let's bring everything else down. Now let's review how we read this part correctly. This is the opposite of a negative 27, which would be a positive 27. So I'm going to use a different color pen. You could use a different colored pencil and make both of those plus signs. So we have 22 plus 27, which is 49. And I really should highlight that because that's the work we're doing at that time. And let's number those lines of work. 49 is our final answer. Number 6, we have brackets. So I'm going to ignore the first part for just a moment. And notice inside the bracket, I have subtraction only. So let's highlight that. Now, again, let's look at this. This is the opposite of a -2. Well, what's the opposite of a -2? A positive 2. So let's make those both plus signs. So a -5 and a positive 2 gives us a -3. Here, let's use a different color here. -3. And we protect it with parentheses. But look, we have an exponent outside the bracket. So that means we need to bring the brackets down and the exponent goes outside of that. Now let's bring everything else down. So looking at this, we have grouping symbols. Well, in this case, the grouping symbol has to do with this exponent. So that's what we're going to do first. And we're going to review that in the calculator. So I'm going to clear. That would be left parenthesis, -3 right parenthesis, caret 2, enter. And that's a +9. So I do not need parentheses or brackets. Let's bring everything else down. And let's go over the steps. Step 1, grouping symbols. No. Step 2, exponents or roots. No. Step 3, multiplication or division. Yes, we have both. But again, we work left to right, so that means we're going to multiply first. -7 times +9 is a -63. That's a negative number, so we need to protect it with parentheses. And now I bring that divide 9 down. Since division is the last thing I have to do, I'm going to highlight that. And a -63 divided by a +9 is a -7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of work. The answer is -7. And again, I don't put parentheses around it because that is my final answer. Number 7, I have grouping symbols, brackets. So I have subtraction, an exponent, and addition. Which do I do first according to my steps? Well, that would be the exponent. So let's highlight that exponent. And let's put that in the calculator. That would be left parenthesis, -2, right parenthesis, caret 2, enter. And we get a +4. So let's bring everything else down. And notice I still have those grouping symbols. So in the grouping symbol, I have subtraction and addition. Both are in step 4. So that means we have to work left to right. So what is -5 minus 4? Well, if you can't remember, you can put in the calculator. But -5 minus 4 is a -9. So let's put that in the parentheses to protect and bring everything else down, including the brackets. We still have brackets and work inside, so I'm going to highlight that. That's -9 plus 5. -9 plus 5 is a -4. That's a negative number. So I'm going to protect that negative with parentheses. I do not need to bring down the brackets because we don't have any work going on within the brackets. That's -4, and we're protecting with the parentheses. But let's bring down the times and the -6. Next, we're going to multiply. -6 times -4 is a +24. That's our answer. So let's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of work. Number 8. Let's look at the grouping symbols. We have subtraction, an exponent, and addition. Let's do that exponent first. -3 squared using our calculator. Left parenthesis, -3 right parenthesis, caret 2, enter. That's a +9. Let's bring everything else down. And look inside the brackets again. we have subtraction, and we have addition. Well, we have to do the subtraction first. So 2 minus 9 is a negative 7. Because 7's negative, we need to protect it. So that means we're going to put parentheses around it to protect. And now bring everything else down. We still have brackets. We still have work inside the brackets. So I'm going to highlight that. Negative 7 plus a negative 5 is a negative 12. And since 12 is negative, we're going to protect with parentheses. We no longer need the brackets because we don't have any work within the brackets. But now we're going to bring down the times negative 7. We only have that left to do, so I'm going to highlight. And negative 7 times a negative 12 is a positive 84. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of work. We have 2 more problems to go over. Let's start with the brackets. We have an exponent, subtraction, and addition. We're going to do the exponent first. 9 squared. You can put that in your calculator if you like. That's 9 caret 2. That would be 81. And now bring everything else down. We still have work inside the brackets. We have subtraction and addition. Subtraction and addition are both step 4, so that means we work left to right. So I'm going to highlight that subtraction because that's on the left. This is read opposite of a negative. So what's the opposite of a negative? That would be a positive. So this is 81 plus 4, which is 85. Now let's bring everything else down, including the brackets. And we still have brackets and work inside the brackets, so let's highlight that work because it's addition. 85 plus 3 is 88. 88 is a positive number. That means I do not need to bring down any parentheses or a bracket. I can leave it like that. And now I'm going to bring down the division and negative 8. So that's what we have left to do. I'm going to highlight that. 88 divided by a negative 8 is negative 11. I do not need to put parentheses around that negative 11 because that is my final answer. And I've also numbered my lines of work. Last problem. Notice I don't have grouping symbols because the parentheses are being used to protect those negative numbers. So step 2, I'm looking for exponents, and I do see an exponent, and that is 3 cubed. So let's use our calculator and find out what 3 cubed is. That's 3 caret 3, enter, and we get a positive 27. And let's bring everything else down. Next thing I need to look for, I don't have grouping symbols. I don't have any more exponents or roots. Step 3, I'm looking for multiplication or division. Well, notice I see both multiplication and division, but I have to work left to right, which means I have to do the 6 times negative 9. Well, 6 times negative 9, isn't that a negative 54? So I'm going to put in parentheses negative 54. And bring everything else down. So that's the minus sign, the negative 6, and division of 27. So now I look through my steps. Do I have grouping symbols? No. Do I have exponents or roots? Step 2, no. Step 3, do I have multiplication or division? And my answer is yes, I have division. So I'm going to highlight that division. That is negative 54 divided by 27. Well, negative 54 divided by 27, that's a negative 2. So I'm going to protect that with parentheses. And I'm going to bring everything else down. So I only have subtraction left. I'm going to highlight that. But let's look at this. Isn't this the opposite of a negative? Well, what's the opposite of a negative 2? Well, that's a positive 2. So this is negative 6 plus 2, which is negative 4. Negative 4 is my answer. I do not need to surround it with parentheses. All I'm going to do now is just number my lines of work. And that's it for our guided practice. What I want you to do now is I want you to do independent practice. You're going to do these problems and you're going to upload your answers only into Edulastic for practice number 3. Now, notice I numbered these. I highly recommend that you keep your practice work and you number them just like I did, because you will need that information for your practice 4. Thank you.